Do you believe in four-legged heroes? If you listen to the story I'm about to tell, you may find yourself changing your mind.
That summer evening began like countless others in Ravenwood. The air was sweet with the smell of freshly cut grass, the hum of cicadas swelled in the trees, and children's laughter drifted across backyards like music. Ravenwood was the kind of town where people still left their doors unlocked, where neighbors waved from porches, and where the biggest excitement might be the annual county fair. 8-year-old Anna Carter lived in the heart of this peaceful neighborhood. She was a child who carried sunshine wherever she went. Her hair, the color of autumn leaves, seemed to glow in the fading light. She clutched a worn stuffed bunny, its ears frayed from years of love, as she skipped barefoot across her backyard. From the porch, her mother Linda smiled softly. She was exhausted from work, but watching Anna play made the fatigue worth it. Her husband, Mark, sat beside her, sipping iced tea. To them, life felt ordinary, safe, predictable. And then, in the blink of an eye, that illusion shattered. When Linda turned to call Anna in for dinner, the yard was empty. The swing rocked gently. The little red ball rolled lazily across the grass. At first, Linda thought Anna had darted inside or slipped to the neighbors to play. But when minutes passed and there was no answer to her calls, panic ignited in her chest. "Anna!" she screamed, her voice tearing through the evening calm. That cry was unlike anything Ravenwood had ever heard. Raw, desperate, a sound that dragged neighbors out of their homes. The police arrived within minutes. Flashlights cut through the darkness, beams sweeping over every bush, every shed, every alley. They called Anna's name until their throats ached. Neighbors formed lines, pushing into the woods, tripping over roots, desperate to find a trace. Detective James Miller pulled up in his unmarked sedan, his partner Rex leaping out before the car even stopped. Rex was a German shepherd, muscles taut beneath his coat, his amber eyes sharp and restless. He was no ordinary dog. Years of training and countless missions had honed him into a creature of precision. Yet beyond the badge and commands, Rex was family to Miller, bound by loyalty deeper than words. Miller crouched beside him, strapping on the harness. "Find her, boy," he murmured, his voice low, steady. Rex sniffed the ground, his body tightening like a spring. Then he pulled, strong and sure, leading Miller toward the property line, toward the house next door, the house of Mr. Harris. Harris had always been polite, if distant. He mowed his lawn on Saturdays, drove an aging pickup, and kept mostly to himself. No one in Ravenwood could say much about him, and perhaps that was why Miller's stomach clenched when Rex dragged him to Harris's fence, barking low, ears stiff. They knocked. Harris answered quickly, rag in hand, his face unreadable. "Evening, officers. What's all the commotion?" His voice was calm, maybe too calm. "A little girl is missing," Miller said evenly. "Did you see anything unusual?" Harris shook, his head expression smooth as glass. "I was out running errands, groceries." He produced a receipt from his pocket, the ink fresh, the timestamp aligning perfectly. Surveillance later confirmed his presence at the store. On paper, Harris was clean, but Rex didn't care about paper. He clawed at the ground, nose pressed, to the grass, tail rigid, body trembling with urgency. Miller had learned to trust that stance. It was instinct sharpened by countless cases, but suspicion without proof was a hollow weight. The night stretched into dawn. Volunteers scoured the woods, voices breaking as they called Anna's name. Linda collapsed against Mark, sobbing, while he held her tight, his own tears falling silently. The sight of that family shattered Miller. Ravenwood changed overnight. Flyers with Anna's face, that bright smile, those sparkling eyes, appeared on every street lamp, every storefront. Strangers stopped Linda at the grocery store, whispering words of comfort that felt like dust in her hands. Days blurred. Leads came and died, each one extinguishing hope a little more. A girl spotted at a diner miles away, not Anna. A pink shoe in the woods, wrong size. Each disappointment was a dagger. The town grew restless. Parents gripped their children's, Hands tighter, porch lights burned all night. Conversations hushed when Harris walked by, though no one could name a reason why suspicion lingered. He smiled when spoken to, even offered to help search, his words laced with practiced sympathy. Yet behind those eyes was something Miller couldn't shake, a calm too rehearsed, a sadness too shallow. Rex refused to let go. Every patrol brought him back to Harris's yard. He whined, barked, pulled hard, refusing to move on. At night, he paced restlessly in Miller's home, nose pressed against the window, staring into the dark as if he could see through walls. Miller lay awake, haunted. He had seen cases collapse before, had witnessed families left with nothing but unanswered questions. But this time was different. This time he had Rex's unyielding certainty. One evening, when exhaustion pressed like lead against his bones, Miller poured a cup of coffee and whispered to the empty room. "We're not done, Anna. Not while he's breathing. Not while Rex is breathing." Rex lifted his head, eyes glinting in the lamplight. His tail thumped once, a sound like a promise. Somewhere in Ravenwood, Anna was waiting. And if no one else could hear her cries, Rex could. The third day came, with no answers. The sun rose hot and merciless, baking the searchers as they trudged through fields and woods. Sweat streaked faces, voices cracked from shouting Anna's name. Volunteers were dwindling. The first wave of urgency had given way, to exhaustion, to the creeping realization that finding a missing child was not always a matter of hours or even days. Sometimes it stretched into weeks. Sometimes, the ending was one no one dared to speak aloud. Linda Carter hadn't slept since Anna disappeared. Her eyes were swollen, red-rimmed, her voice a rasp. She clutched Anna's stuffed bunny everywhere. She went, the fur damp from tears. Mark tried to keep her grounded, tried to feed her, remind her to drink water, but he was unraveling too. His once strong frame seemed to fold in on itself, shoulders hunched, as if carrying the unbearable weight of guilt. Detective Miller watched them from a distance one afternoon as Linda broke down on the porch, collapsing into Mark's arms. Miller felt his jaw tighten, his throat ache. He had sworn an oath to protect, to serve, to bring justice. But what justice was there in a silence that stretched for days? Rex was restless, pulling at the leash during searches, barking at shadows, near Harris's property. Each time Miller tried to redirect him, but the dog circled back, nose pressed to the same patches of ground, as if the earth itself whispered secrets only he could hear. On the fourth night, Miller couldn't take it anymore. He parked down the street from Harris's house, engine off, lights dark. Rex sat alert in the passenger seat, eyes locked on the small house with its drawn curtains. Harris moved inside, a silhouette passing windows, a man pouring a drink, watching television. To any ordinary eye, it was mundane. To Miller, it was theater. Rex growled low, the sound rumbling from his chest. Miller placed a hand on the dog's head. "I know, boy. I know." Inside that house was either an innocent man living under a cloud of suspicion, or a monster hiding behind a mask, and Miller didn't know which was worse. By the fifth day, the press had grown vicious. Cameras shoved into Miller's face, reporters barking questions. Was this a kidnapping? Was Anna alive? Why hadn't the police made an arrest? Each word was another cut. Linda and Mark begged the media to respect their pain, but the story was too big. Ravenwood was no longer a quiet town. It was a spectacle. At a press conference, Miller stood at the podium, Rex sitting tall at his side. Flashes popped like lightning. "We are pursuing every lead," Miller said firmly. "We will not stop until Anna is found." He looked at Linda in the front row, her hollow eyes, her trembling hands gripping the bunny, and his voice nearly cracked. Afterward, Linda approached him, her voice breaking. "Detective, please bring her home." Miller's throat burned. He wanted to promise, but promises were dangerous. Instead, he placed his hand over hers. "We're not giving up. Not while Rex has breath in his body." On the sixth day, a false lead shattered what little hope remained. A caller claimed to have seen a child matching Anna's description at a rest stop 50 miles away. Police scrambled. Miller and Rex raced down the highway with lights flashing, hearts pounding. But the child was someone else. A stranger's daughter, alive and safe. Relief for that family. Devastation for the Carters. When Miller returned to Ravenwood, Linda collapsed in the station lobby. "She's gone," she whispered, rocking the bunny in her arms. "My baby's gone." Mark knelt beside her, his own tears falling freely. For the first time, Miller saw him break, the stoic husband dissolving into a father lost in grief. The sound of their cries echoed in the station, heavy and suffocating. Officers looked away, ashamed of their own helplessness. That night, Miller sat in his darkened kitchen, staring at his badge on the table. His reflection wavered in the metal. He felt the crushing weight of failure. Across from him, Rex lay with his head on his paws, eyes wide open, watching him silently. Finally, Miller spoke. "I don't know how to save her." His voice cracked. "God help me, I don't." Rex lifted his head, ears pricking as if answering. He stood, walked over, and placed his head on Miller's knee. The gesture was simple, but in that moment, it was enough. The seventh day dawned gray and heavy. A storm brewed on the horizon. Volunteers had dwindled to a handful, their voices hoarse, their bodies weary. Ravenwood felt different, darker, quieter, the innocence stripped away. Parents clutched their children closer, glancing over their shoulders. No one trusted anyone, and still Rex returned to Harris's yard. His nose pressed to the same spot near the shed. His body stiffened, tail high, bark sharp. Miller crouched, brushing the ground with his fingers. Grass, dirt, nothing. But Rex's certainty was a fire that would not die. Miller rose, eyes fixed, on the house with its drawn curtains. "You know something I don't you, boy?" he whispered. Rex barked once, sharp and sure, the sound cutting through the stormy air like a vow. Somewhere, Anna's small voice waited to be heard, and Miller swore that he and Rex would be the ones to hear it. The eighth day began with thunder rolling low across the horizon. Dark clouds pressed down on Ravenwood, heavy and suffocating. The weather mirrored the town's mood, weary, hopeless, fraying at the edges. By now, volunteers were nearly gone. The early flood of helpers had trickled into a handful of neighbors and church members. Some whispered that Anna might never be found, that maybe she had been taken far beyond Ravenwood. Others avoided Linda and Mark altogether, unable to face the raw devastation in their eyes. Linda herself was unraveling. She no longer brushed her hair, no longer ate. She wandered the house like a ghost, clutching Anna's bunny, whispering prayers under her breath. Sometimes she screamed into her pillow until her voice cracked. Sometimes she sat in silence, staring at the swing in the yard. On the 9th day, she collapsed in church. She had lit a candle for Anna, the small flame flickering against her pale face. Then her knees buckled, her body crumpling as sobs tore out of her. The congregation rushed to her side, but her cries echoed long after she was carried out. "She's just a little girl. She's just a baby." Mark grew quieter with each passing day. He worked mechanically, taking calls, speaking with police, answering questions, but his eyes were hollow. One evening, Miller found him in the garage, sitting on the floor with a beer in his hand, staring at the half-finished dollhouse he had been building for Anna's birthday. The wood was scattered, the paintbrush dry. Mark didn't look up when Miller entered. "I promised her I'd finish it," he whispered, voice breaking. "Now I don't even know if she'll live to see it." Miller had no words. He wanted to tell Mark to hold on, to believe, but how could he, when every lead had dissolved into nothing? The 10th day brought reporters swarming again. A national network ran a segment calling Anna the little girl who vanished without a trace. The Carters' faces were plastered across televisions. Strangers online speculated, dissected, accused. Some even turned suspicion toward the parents as if grief itself was proof of guilt. Linda smashed the television that night, throwing it off the counter with a scream. The screen shattered, glass spraying across the floor. Mark pulled her into his arms, but she thrashed, sobbing, "They think we did it. They think it's us." Miller stood in the doorway, jaw-tight fury burning in his chest. He hated the media circus, hated the way it fed on pain like vultures. Through it all, Rex was constant. He dragged Miller back to Harris's property again, and again nose pressed against the earth near the shed, body tense, barking sharp and insistent. Harris, meanwhile, played his role well. He waved politely when he saw officers, offered them coffee, even joined one search through the woods, his flashlight cutting through the night. To the untrained eye, he was a helpful neighbor. To Miller, he was a mask. The 11th day nearly broke him. A tip came in from a truck driver. A girl matching Anna's description seen walking along a highway, disoriented, barefoot. Miller and Rex raced out, heart pounding. But when they arrived, the girl was 10, not 8. She belonged to another family, one that was reunited with tears of relief. Miller stood aside, watching their embrace, his chest hollow. For every child found, Anna's absence grew heavier. That night, rain poured over Ravenwood. Streets turned slick, thunder cracked the sky. Miller parked once again near Harris's house, watching through the windshield. Harris's lights glowed warmly. Inside he cooked, cleaned, watched television. Ordinary. Too ordinary. Rex sat upright, ears perked, growling low. His body vibrated with restrained energy. Miller's hand tightened on the steering wheel. "What are you telling me, boy?" On the 12th day, Linda lashed out. She stormed into the station, her voice ragged. "You're not doing enough. My daughter is out there, and you're sitting here with paperwork." She slammed Anna's photo onto Miller's desk, the frame cracking. "She's 8 years old, she's scared, and you're letting her slip away." Tears blurred Miller's vision. He wanted to tell her about Rex, about the suspicion he couldn't prove. But words meant nothing without evidence. Instead, he stood silently as Linda collapsed into sobs, her fists pounding the desk until they bled. Mark carried her out, whispering, "Come on, sweetheart. Come on." The 13th day felt endless. The storm cleared, leaving the air damp, heavy with the smell of wet earth. Ravenwood was eerily quiet. Children no longer played outside. Stores closed early. The once lively town had turned inward, suffocated by fear. That evening, Miller walked Rex past Harris's house again. As always, Rex stopped, nose pressed against the ground by the shed. But this time, he whined, pawing furiously, digging at the dirt until his nails were muddy. Miller's heart hammered. He crouched, running his hands over the ground. At first, just soil, but then his fingers brushed something small. A thread. Pink. Faded. Frayed. Miller's breath caught. He held it up, the streetlight catching the faint shimmer. His pulse roared in his ears. It was so small, so fragile. But it was something. Rex barked sharply, tail stiff, eyes burning with certainty. The 14th day dawned with a fragile spark of hope. For the first time in 2 weeks, Miller had a lead, thin as spider silk but real. A thread that didn't belong in Harris's yard. A thread that looked like it could have come from a little girl's dress. He gripped Rex's harness, whispering with a voice full of fire. "You found her, boy. You found the way." The 15th day dawned pale and heavy. A weak sun crept over Ravenwood, but the town no longer greeted mornings with the same warmth. Curtains stayed closed, porches remained empty, and the air carried the weight of silence. Detective Miller sat at his desk, the pink thread sealed inside a plastic evidence bag. It was small, almost laughably so, but to him it was monumental. It was proof, not enough for a warrant, not enough to shatter Harris's alibi, but enough to confirm what Rex had been screaming all along. Anna had been here. He replayed every moment in his mind. Harris's calm smile, his rehearsed answers. The way Rex had fixated on the yard, the shed, the ground. Miller's instincts had whispered suspicion, but Rex's certainty roared it. Miller rubbed his tired eyes, staring across the room at Rex. The dog sat tall, watchful, as if he too understood the weight of the thread. Linda and Mark were called to the station that morning. Miller laid the evidence bag gently on the table before them. Linda's trembling hands hovered over it, her breath catching. Mark leaned forward, eyes burning. "What? What is this?" Linda whispered. Miller spoke softly. "We found it near Harris's shed. It matches the description of the dress Anna was wearing the night she disappeared." Linda's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. Mark's fist clenched tight, knuckles white. "Then arrest him," he roared. "He has her, I know he does." Miller's voice hardened, frustration lacing every word. "It's not that simple, we don't have enough. If we move too soon, if we go in without proof, he could slip away. Or worse, he could hurt her." Silence fell. Linda sobbed into Mark's shoulder, her cries tearing through the room. Miller looked away, shame twisting in his chest. He hated the truth. Hated that sometimes justice required patience. Hated that a child's life could hang on the thin thread of bureaucracy. That night, Miller returned to his car outside Harris's home. The house was dark, curtains drawn tight. The air was thick, suffocating, every shadow stretching long under the streetlights. Rex sat rigid in the passenger seat, ears pricked, body tense. Miller whispered, more to himself than to anyone else, "If you've got her in there, Harris, I'll find out. I'll tear this whole town apart if I have to." Rex growled low, a sound that rumbled like thunder in the confined car. His amber eyes glowed in the dark, locked on the house. On the 16th day, the storm finally broke. Not the kind that rolled with thunder and rain, but the storm inside Miller's chest. He stood before his team, the evidence bag in hand, voice steady but burning with fire. "This is our lead. I don't care how thin it is. I don't care if the DA laughs it out of the room. We follow it. We tear apart every inch of Harris's world until we find Anna. No more waiting. No more dead ends. This girl is out there, and we're bringing her home." Rex barked once, sharp and decisive, the sound echoing in the silent room. And for the first time in 2 weeks, hope, fragile, flickering, burned in Ravenwood again. The morning after the discovery of the pink thread, Ravenwood awoke to a cautious optimism. For 2 long weeks, the town had been drowning in despair, but now there was something tangible, fragile, yet undeniable. Detective Miller sat in the operations room, maps of Ravenwood spread across the table. The bagged thread sat in the center like a relic. Officers shuffled in, notebooks ready, eyes restless. "This is where we start," Miller said, pointing to Harris's property. "It's not enough for a warrant yet, but it tells us something. Anna was near that shed. Rex knows it, and I trust him more than I trust any alibi." Rex sat at Miller's side, tail still, ears pricked. The dog had barely rested, pacing through the night as if his body carried the same urgency that consumed Miller. The team nodded, though unease flickered on their faces. Without hard evidence, their hands were tied. Miller knew it, but he also knew one truth. Predators like Harris always slipped eventually, and Rex was going to catch the slip. That afternoon, Miller returned to Harris's neighborhood. The man was outside, trimming hedges with casual ease, a soft smile on his lips. To anyone else, he looked like an ordinary neighbor, the kind who waved on his way to church. But Miller saw through it now. He saw the stiffness in Harris's movements, the way his eyes darted too quickly toward Miller's car before averting. Rex growled low, pressing his nose to the window, tail stiff. Harris raised a hand in a mock-friendly wave. "Detective," he called, voice smooth as honey. "Still watching me? I do hope you'll eventually realize I've got nothing to hide." Miller stepped out, leaning against his car. "You always keep your shed locked tight?" "Of course. Tools are expensive. Can't risk thieves, you know." Harris's smile widened, but his eyes didn't match. Rex barked sharply, teeth flashing, against the glass. The sound made Harris flinch unbarely, but Miller caught it. Miller let the silence hang before he spoke again. Funny thing about secrets, Harris. They don't stay buried forever. For the first time, Harris's smile faltered. On the 17th day, Miller made a decision. If the system demanded more, he would find more. He brought Rex back to the woods behind Harris's property, retracing steps they'd walked before. The dog sniffed furiously, nose pressed to the ground, weaving between trees and roots. Suddenly, Rex froze. His body stiffened, tail raised, ears sharp. He barked once, then began pulling forward, strong and insistent. Miller's pulse quickened. "What is it, boy? Show me." Rex led him deeper into the trees, paws trampling leaves until they reached a clearing. There, half buried under brush, was a small cloth, pink, torn, dirt-stained. Miller's hands shook as he lifted it with gloves. It matched the thread. It matched Anna's dress, his chest constricted, torn between horror and hope. If this was here, Anna had been here, maybe still close. He radioed the team, voice steady despite his pounding heart. "We've got something. Send forensics. Now." Rex stood guard over the torn fabric, growling low, as if daring the forest itself to hide more secrets. News spread fast. The community gathered again, hope flickering alive like fragile flames. Linda clutched the fabric piece when Miller showed it to her, sobbing as though she held Anna herself. But the discovery put Harris under a new light. His calm facade was cracking. The man avoided his porch now, curtains drawn tighter than ever. He no longer waved when Miller's car appeared. That night, Miller and Rex parked once again near the house. Hours crawled by in silence until, at midnight, the back door creaked open. Harris slipped out, glancing over his shoulder, clutching a flashlight. He moved toward the shed. Rex growled deep, a sound that vibrated in Miller's chest. Miller grabbed his binoculars. Harris fumbled with the lock, disappeared inside, and after several minutes emerged with a duffel bag. He moved quickly into the woods. Miller's heart thundered. "He's moving something. Let's go." Rex lunged forward, muscles taut, eyes blazing with purpose. And for the first time, Miller felt the case shifting. The predator was cornered, and Rex was ready to strike. The night was thick with silence, broken only by the crunch of Harris's boots against the forest floor. His flashlight bobbed in the darkness, slicing through the trees in erratic sweeps. From a distance, Miller followed, every nerve burning with anticipation. Rex was at his side, a taut leash straining against Miller's grip. The dog moved low, fluid, his nose cutting the night air like a blade. "Easy, boy," Miller whispered, though his own heart thundered with urgency. Harris stopped suddenly, turning his light across the clearing. Miller ducked behind a tree, holding his breath. Rex froze with him, muscles coiled but silent. Harris muttered something under his breath, set the duffel bag down, and began digging at the earth with a small spade. Miller's chest tightened. What was inside that bag? Rex growled low, barely audible. The sound wasn't rage, it was recognition. Miller knew that growl. Rex smelled Anna. Miller's pulse spiked. His hand hovered over his radio, torn between calling backup and charging forward. But Harris suddenly stopped, head snapping toward the tree line. His eyes scanned the dark, suspicious. Miller pressed deeper into the shadows. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then, just as suddenly, Harris zipped the duffel shut, slung it over his shoulder, and disappeared deeper into the woods. Rex strained against the leash, desperate to follow. Miller whispered, "We're on him now." Lead the way, and together, man and dog slipped into the darkness. The trail wound deeper than Miller expected, far past the boundaries of Harris's property. Rex never wavered, pulling forward with single-minded focus. The scent was strong, undeniable. Finally, they reached a shack, old, weathered, hidden beneath the tangled arms of trees. Its windows were boarded, its door chained, yet faint light flickered through the cracks. Miller's stomach dropped. Harris unlocked the door, slipped inside, and shut it quickly behind him. Miller crouched low, heart racing. He could hear muffled movement from within, the creak of floorboards, the thud of something heavy being set down. Rex pressed close, his body trembling with restrained energy. His ears perked, nose pointed at the shack. Then softly, he whined. Miller swallowed hard. That sound cut through him like a blade. Rex was telling him what he already feared. Anna had been here. Maybe she was still here. He radioed quietly for backup, voice tight. "This is Miller. I've got eyes on Harris, location pinned, move fast." Minutes felt like hours. The night wrapped around him, thick and suffocating. Then, through the thin cracks of the shack, he heard it. A sound so faint he almost convinced himself it wasn't real. A child's sob. Miller's breath caught. His fists clenched. Rex's growl deepened. The raid was swift. Floodlights cut through the night as officers surrounded the shack, weapons drawn. Harris bolted from the door but was immediately tackled, his duffel bag spilling open onto the dirt. Inside were rope, duct tape, and a child's shoe. The crowd that gathered screamed with rage, restrained only by the officers holding the line. Harris shouted over the chaos, his voice desperate, manic. "You've got nothing, that's not proof, she's not here." Miller ignored him, pushing into the shack with Rex at his side. The smell hit him first. Damp wood, mildew, and fear. The interior was sparse, littered with food wrappers, a mattress, and chains bolted to the wall. The flashlight beam quivered in Miller's hand as he scanned every corner. "Anna," his voice cracked. "Anna, it's Detective Miller. You're safe now." Silence. Then, from beneath a loose floorboard, Rex barked furiously, pawing and clawing with desperation. Miller dropped to his knees, prying the wood up. His light caught movement. A small, trembling figure curled beneath the floor. Anna. Her eyes were wide, tear-streaked, but alive. Miller's vision blurred as relief surged through him. "It's okay, sweetheart. We've got you. You're going home," Rex barked again, this time sharp and victorious, his tail whipping like a flag. Word spread like wildfire. By dawn, Ravenwood gathered at the station. Mothers wept openly. Fathers clenched their jaws to keep from breaking. Children clung to their parents, holding tighter than ever. Linda and Mark rushed into the room where Anna was being cared for. The reunion shattered the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. Linda dropped to her knees, pulling Anna into her arms, sobbing into her hair. Mark stood frozen, tears streaming down his face as he touched his daughter's cheek, whispering her name like a prayer. Anna, still fragile, whispered. Rex found me. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the dog sitting proudly at Miller's side. Rex's ears perked, his gaze steady, noble. Linda knelt and wrapped her arms around his neck, tears soaking his fur. "Thank you. Thank you for bringing her back." Miller stood behind them, exhaustion heavy in his bones but his heart swelling with pride. For once, the weight of his badge felt lighter. Outside, the community gathered in the rising sun, voices lifting not in despair, but in gratitude. Anna was home and Harris's mask had finally shattered. The station's interrogation room was small, windowless, suffocating. Harris sat at the table, wrists cuffed, his smug smile creeping back despite the evidence stacked against him. Across from him, Miller leaned forward, voice low and sharp. "You had Anna. We found her in your shack. Rope, duct tape, chains. It's over." Harris chuckled, shaking his head slowly. "Over? No, detective. You've got it all wrong. That girl came to me. She was scared, lost. I was keeping her safe." Miller slammed a hand on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Safe? In chains? Buried under floorboards?" For the first time, Harris's smile faltered, though only for a heartbeat. "You can twist it however you want, but you've got no proof I hurt her. No DNA, no bruises that can't be explained. She'll forget this in time." Miller's jaw tightened. He wanted to lunge across the table to tear the mask from Harris's face. but he held himself back. He knew predators thrived on control, and Miller refused to give him any satisfaction. Through the one-way mirror, Rex sat watching, calm but alert, his amber eyes locked on Harris. Every so often, his lip curled in a silent growl, as if his instincts saw what Harris's words tried to hide. Miller whispered, almost to himself, "You slipped once, Harris. You'll slip again. And when you do, I'll be there." Outside the station, Ravenwood seethed. Crowds gathered, voices rising with fury. Hand-painted signs demanded justice. Mothers clutched their children closer. Fathers shouted for harsher punishments. Linda and Mark stood on the steps, holding Anna between them. Her small hand gripped Rex's fur tightly, unwilling to let go. Reporters swarmed, microphones shoved forward. "How do you feel about the arrest?" one asked. Linda's voice trembled but rang clear. "He stole 2 weeks of our lives. He stole my daughter's safety. But we're standing here because of this dog, because Rex never gave up." The crowd erupted, chants of "Hero, hero," echoing into the morning sky. Rex stood tall beside Miller, unbothered by the noise, his gaze steady. For a moment he seemed less like a dog and more like a guardian carved from flesh and spirit, a reminder that true heroes didn't always wear badges or uniforms. Sometimes they walked on 4 legs. But beneath the cheers, Miller saw the darker truth. Harris wasn't finished. Predators like him never acted alone, never without layers of secrets, and Miller couldn't shake the feeling that Ravenwood's nightmare wasn't over yet. The evidence team combed through Harris's shack, pulling apart floorboards, digging into the earth beneath. What they found chilled Miller to his core. Bones. Small, fragile, long buried. Not Anna's, thank God, but others. Children whose names had been long forgotten, whose disappearances had faded into whispers of rumor. Miller's breath caught as he stared at the fragments laid out on tarps. His knuckles whitened as rage surged through him. Harris wasn't just a kidnapper, he was something far worse, a predator who had walked free for years under the mask of a neighbor. When confronted, Harris sneered. "You think I'm the only one? Ravenwood's full of secrets. I'm just the one dumb enough to get caught." The words clawed at Miller's mind. Was it bluster, or a confession of something deeper? Rex snarled, lunging at the glass, teeth bared as if he too sensed the rot festering behind Harris's calm demeanor. Miller whispered, "You're going to rot, Harris? But not before you give me every secret you've buried." By the 19th day, Ravenwood was transformed. The shadows of fear had given way to a fragile hope, yet unease lingered. Harris was in custody, but his words haunted Miller. At the town hall, the community gathered to honor Rex. Children draped ribbons around his neck, mothers kissed his fur, fathers shook Miller's hand with tears in their eyes. Anna stood before the crowd, her voice small but strong. "I was scared. I thought nobody would find me. But Rex did, he never stopped. That's why I'm here." The room erupted in applause, echoing through the rafters. But Miller's mind wasn't at ease. The bones, the secrets Harris hinted at, the possibility that he wasn't alone, it all gnawed at him. As the ceremony ended, Miller knelt beside Rex, running a hand over his fur. "We did good, boy. But I think this goes deeper. And if there are more out there like Harris." Rex pressed his head into Miller's chest, a steady presence in the storm. His amber eyes seemed to say what Miller already knew. The fight wasn't over. The crowd's cheers filled the night, but Miller's gaze lingered on the horizon. Somewhere out there, shadows were waiting, and with Rex by his side, he was ready to face them. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Anna's parents watched over her as she slept, her tiny chest rising and falling beneath the soft blanket. Though her body was safe now, the shadow of fear lingered in every corner of their minds. Every creak of the wooden floor, every whisper of wind against the window felt like a reminder of what had been stolen from them, their sense of security. Rex lay near Anna's bed, his dark eyes open, ears twitching at the faintest sound. He had been restless since the night of the rescue, pacing at times, growling in his sleep as if still chasing Harris through the woods. John would often kneel beside him, resting a hand on the shepherd's strong neck. "She's safe," John whispered one night, his voice thick with gratitude and exhaustion. "You did it, boy. You brought her back." Yet even John knew that survival left scars. Anna sometimes woke up in the night, crying out for her mother. She clung tightly to her father, refusing to let go, afraid that if she blinked, the world would snatch her away again. The town of Ravenwood, too, carried its own scars. The revelation that Harris, a familiar neighbor, a trusted face, was behind the crime shook the community to its core. People questioned themselves, whispered to each other in disbelief. How had no one seen the darkness hiding behind his smile? And so both family and town began the long, painful process of healing. But scars are not erased overnight. They are lived with, carried, and sometimes transformed into strength. Ravenwood streets had never felt so heavy. The marketplace, once alive with laughter and chatter, was now filled with hushed tones and suspicious glances. Mothers held their children closer. Strangers exchanged wary looks. At the diner, conversations always circled back to Harris. He was always quiet, kept to himself, one man said. "No," another interrupted. "He helped fix my fence last summer. Never asked for a dime." "That's the thing," a third whispered. "Monsters hide in plain sight." John overheard these words as he sipped his coffee, Rex sitting faithfully by his side. The officer had returned to work, but he carried a new weight with him. His badge was no longer just a symbol of law. It was a promise, a shield against the shadows lurking too close to home. Rex seemed to sense the shift in the town as well. Children who once ran up to pet him now hesitated, as if afraid that danger might be hiding behind even the gentlest eyes. Yet slowly a few brave ones reached out, smiling when Rex licked their hands. Trust was fragile, but it wasn't gone. The whispers in the town spoke of fear, yes, but also of resilience. They reminded each other that Anna was alive, that justice was approaching, and that perhaps, just perhaps, the darkness would not win. The courthouse in Ravenwood had never seen so many faces. Journalists from nearby cities swarmed the steps, their cameras flashing, their pens scratching as they documented every detail. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Harris sat at the defense table, his expression calm, almost too calm. His lawyer whispered in his ear, but Harris rarely responded. Sometimes he looked toward Anna's family and his eyes would linger, unreadable, cold. Anna was not present for the early hearings. Her parents had shielded her from the storm. Instead, they sat side by side, their hands clenched together, staring at the man who had shattered their world. John testified first. His words were steady, but every sentence carried the weight of sleepless nights. He described the search, the trail Rex had uncovered, the moment Anna was found. As he spoke, Rex was brought into the courtroom. The shepherd walked confidently, his coat shining under the lights, his eyes sharp and unwavering. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "That dog saved her," someone whispered. The defense tried to downplay Rex's role, questioning whether the dog had truly identified Harris, but the evidence spoke louder than doubt. The footprints near the cabin, the rope fibers, the traces of Anna's clothing found in Harris's home. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together, and the picture it formed was undeniable. The courthouse became a battlefield of words, but beneath the arguments the truth simmered, waiting to rise. As the trial stretched on, Anna's family felt as though they were trapped in limbo, caught between the horror of what had been and the hope of what justice could bring. Anna herself was slowly healing. With the help of gentle therapy sessions and the unyielding presence of Rex, she began to smile again. Sometimes she would sit in the backyard, Rex lying at her feet, and she would tell him secrets no one else could hear. Her laughter, though faint, was a light in the darkness. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, John sat with Anna on the porch. "Daddy," she whispered. "Why did he do it?" John paused, his heart breaking. "Sometimes, people choose to hurt others, but that's not your fault. What matters is, you're here, you're safe, and you're loved." Anna leaned against him, and Rex placed his head on her lap. The chain of fear was breaking, link by link, as love replaced despair. In town, people began to gather again. Neighbors visited one another, bringing food, offering hugs. They whispered less about fear and more about courage, about resilience. And in the courthouse, as witnesses lined up, as evidence was laid bare, the chains binding the truth were snapping. Justice was no longer a distant hope. It was drawing, near, steady, and unstoppable. The courtroom was silent, so silent that every breath felt like a thunderclap. The jury filed back into their seats, their faces unreadable. Harris sat motionless, his hands clasped together, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Anna's parents held each other tightly. John sat nearby, his hand resting on Rex's head, grounding himself in the shepherd's steady presence. The judge's voice broke the silence. "On the charges of kidnapping and unlawful restraint, we find the defendant guilty." A collective gasp swept through the room. "On the charges of attempted harm to a minor, we find the defendant guilty." The words fell like heavy stones, but each one carried relief, justice, closure. Harris's mask of calm cracked for the first time, his jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with a mix of anger and defeat. Anna's mother wept softly, burying her face in her husband's shoulder. John closed his eyes, exhaling a breath he had carried for weeks. Rex let out a low, steady rumble, as though he too understood that the darkness had been broken. The verdict was more than punishment. It was a message. Ravenwood would not be ruled by fear. After the trial, Ravenwood gathered in the town square for the first time in months. The mayor spoke, his voice trembling with emotion. "This town has endured shadows," he said, "but together, we've proven that light cannot be extinguished." Anna stood with her parents on the stage, her small hand resting on Rex's head. Cameras flashed, but she was no longer afraid. She smiled shyly, leaning into the shepherd's warmth. Neighbors who once whispered in fear now came forward with flowers, letters, and embraces. The community, fractured by doubt, began to stitch itself together through shared strength. That night, bonfires lit the fields outside town. Children laughed as they ran around the flames, and for the first time since the ordeal began, music filled the air. Anna danced clumsily, Rex trotting beside her, and her laughter rang out like a healing hymn. The firelight reflected in Rex's eyes, turning them into twin embers of resilience. He had become more than a dog. He was a symbol, a guardian of innocence, a living reminder that even in the darkest night, loyalty and courage could ignite hope. Weeks later, the local police department held a special ceremony. Officers, families, and townsfolk gathered to honor Rex. A polished medal was placed around his neck, and applause thundered through the hall. John knelt beside him, whispering, "This is for you, partner. You never gave up." But Rex didn't need medals. His gaze was fixed on Anna, who giggled and clapped her hands. She ran to him, hugging his neck, her small voice echoing, "My hero." The story of Rex spread beyond Ravenwood. Newspapers carried his picture. Children drew him in their notebooks, and strangers sent letters thanking him for reminding them that courage could wear fur and walk on four paws. Still, Rex remained the same, faithful, vigilant, humble. He did not bask in the glory. He simply guarded his family, knowing that his purpose was not fame but love. Spring came to Ravenwood. Blossoms lined the streets, and the air smelled of renewal. Anna walked hand in hand with her parents, Rex trotting beside them, his tail wagging gently. Though scars remained, they no longer defined her. She laughed louder now, played more freely, and even returned to school where friends welcomed her with open arms. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Anna sat with Rex on the porch. She leaned close to him and whispered, "You saved me. You saved all of us." Rex rested his head in her lap, his eyes closing in peaceful contentment. For him, there was no need for words. His actions had spoken louder than any voice could. The shadows that once loomed over Ravenwood had been lifted. Justice had prevailed, love had healed, and hope had bloomed once more. And so, the tale of Anna, her family, and Rex became more than just a story of survival. It was a testament to the unbreakable bond between a child and her dog, between humanity and loyalty, between darkness and the light that always follows. For in the end, the world did not remember the fear, but the courage that conquered it.